Islam does not specify an economic or a political system. The whole idea of an Islamic state is contrary to Islamic tradition, I would argue. It is a modern notion that grew out of the context of colonialism and out of the need for Muslims to deal with colonialism and also to negotiate or develop or regain a sense of identity in an age where the nation state was emerging. Countries were claiming sovereignty based on the notion of citizenship, sometimes defined ethnically, sometimes defined linguistically. So within this context, the idea of an Islamic state was also proposed. Now, the point is that we are fortunate that Islam does not specify an Islamic political system or an economic system. Because if it were to specify an economic or political system, it would limit Muslims. Because Muslims would be bound to, in the future, possibly to an arcane economic or political system. But the reality is that if we look at experience, Muslims have throughout Islamic history had a diversity of economic systems and political systems. What made them Islamic during times and periods when they were Islamic were the universal principles and the universal values and the general principles upon which they were founded. So whether we're talking about the more tribal polity that was established during the time of the Prophet of Islam, or we're talking about the more agrarian-based empires that were set up during the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, or during under the Ottomans or the Mughals, or during the period of various sultanates in Southeast Asia. Whatever kind of system we were talking about, a tribal system from the earlier days of Islam to systems of sultanates, empires, agrarian empires, whether they were or systems based on riverine trade as we had in Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, whatever these systems were, what made them Islamic were that they were based on certain universal principles, even though the systems were different. For example, there was a time in Islamic history when the entire Indian Ocean area from Zanzibar to Malacca, from Zanzibar in the west to Malacca in the east, the entire trade of the Indian Ocean area was controlled by Muslims. One of the reasons why it was controlled by Muslims is because the law, the maritime laws that facilitated trade and made trade easy and made trade possible, made trade predictable in this Indian Ocean area, these maritime laws were based on Sharia, were based on Islamic law, particularly on Hanafi legal texts. So you have the maritime laws of Malacca. You have maritime codes established in Surat, in the southern part of India, in Hormuz, in Iran, in Zanzibar, in Aden, in Shihir, in Hadramaut. In all these areas, traders knew that they knew what laws were governing the taxation and disposal of their goods. Once they put their goods on a ship and set it sail for areas very far away across the ocean, they knew what laws were governing their goods, and this allowed for a kind of rationalism that made trade easy. It facilitated trade because people understood what kinds of laws govern their trade, and therefore it removed the element of arbitrariness. This is an example of how the economic system in those times were Islamic. It wasn't the system that was Islamic. I should correct myself. It wasn't the system that was Islamic. It was that the laws that were implemented were Islamic and therefore founded on certain Islamic principles. But the economic system would change from period to period and from geography to geography. The same thing goes for the polity, for the political system. You have various kinds of political systems. As I said, the tribal polity that was established in the time of the Prophet was vastly different from the Sultanate system that we had in Malacca, or from the Caliphate system that you had during the Umayyad period, the Abbasid period. If they were all Islamic, it was not because of the system, it was because of certain principles that they implemented. And if they were not Islamic, if they were un-Islamic, it was because those Islamic principles were not implemented, not because of the system. No system can be said to be Islamic or un-Islamic.